And we welcome you into episode number 31 of the best podcast available. Working from home editions continue, gentlemen, and we're pleased to be joined. After a couple-week hiatus, we brought him back. We value him. We like him, and we're looking forward to hearing from him. Nathan Zegura joins with Andrew Gribble. I'm Jason Gibbs. Make sure you log on to clevelandbrowns.com or wherever you get your podcast for all of our 30 prior episodes of the best podcast available. Gentlemen, I wish you a happy Thursday morning. The latest news around the league. This is from NFL Network's Tom Pelissero, the NFL and NFLPA discussing the possibility of shortening the 2020 preseason per sources. Might be happy about that. Nothing finalized or imminent, but multiple team execs believe teams could end up playing only 2 preseason games rather than 4. Shortening the preseason would allow for a longer ramp-up period, regardless of whether or not players report earlier than scheduled. Andrew Gribble, your thoughts on the reports from Mr. Pelissero late on Wednesday?
Well, I think that they obviously probably have a lot of stuff to work out with this, because this may sound like a simple endeavor, but I don't think it is. I think that first off, you've got schedules like the Browns, who are currently supposed to do 2 on the road and then 2 at home. So does that mean the Browns then just get 2 home preseason games and some other teams have some tough luck? And then I guess you've got to start talking about the financial viability of this. I mean, these are big events, and that they're on the schedule, and these were planned, and you've got to have a lot of workarounds with that. All that said, if the medical experts come in and say this is the best way to keep these guys healthy after all these months of inactivity or lack of football activity, that is, then you probably have to follow the medical experts with this one. And I think that it'll just be interesting to see what deal is brokered on this and what is the exact reasoning for it, and if it really is a purely medical based reason on this.
Yeah, when you look at this, look, we're trending towards a reduction in the preseason anyway. As soon as we go to the 17 games, we're going to lose a preseason game as it is. Perhaps this is a way to test that out and see, do people miss the preseason games? Do the teams miss the preseason games? How does that look? The thing about it is, as of now, not only are they big events, they're big for the teams in terms of their local revenue. Preseason TV contracts are a huge part of what you do with your partners with that TV contract, and those are negotiated on having 4 preseason games. And so there is a big financial aspect to this as well that I think would have to be worked through. I'm not surprised that they want to give players a longer ramp-up time before the regular season, and ultimately that's what matters the most. That's why we've heard perhaps that training camps would open a week or 2 earlier, which would alleviate this problem anyway. You could play your 4 preseason games and have that longer ramp-up. So it's all going to come down to what the NFL and the NFLPA can work out, because one of the things is you can only have training camp open a certain number of days prior to your first game, which is why training camps open when they do. And so for a team like the Browns and for the players, it would require the NFLPA to change what has already been collectively bargained, knowing that it has been a unique circumstance and there weren't OTAs, there weren't mini camps, there were none of those things. So could that happen? I don't know. So far, our guy J.C. Tretter is defending the players as ferociously as he defends Baker Mayfield, and that's what he's been charged to do. And frankly, he's doing a good job of it, as we see whenever something comes out that might be not necessarily, I don't know if positive is the right word, but a movement, we'll call it, in terms of the plan for when people report or whatever. JC's and me like, don't believe anything unless you hear it from me. And then 2 seconds later, we typically get a tweet from one of the beat people on the NFL beat saying, yeah, the NFLPA is not into this.
Yeah, I think that part really comes into play. Diana Rossini from ESPN yesterday saying while there were discussions about letting limited players back in the facilities next week, sources told the NFLPA, are saying the NFLPA denied the proposal. Player safety clearly a priority. And Z, I think when you take a look at this, we're talking 2 preseason, 3 preseason, 4 preseason. We're talking all this. We're talking 6 weeks, maybe earlier, maybe later in terms of how many weeks of training camp you're going to get. The NFLPA has definitely taken the approach, and it's the right approach. We need to know that everything is ready. Protocols are in place. And I know there was a protocol memo sent out to all the teams earlier in the week, but clearly the NFLPA wants to make sure we don't start getting mass cases of this and have to shut down the league.
No, and I think as we've seen all along, 2 weeks from now, the world could be completely different in terms of how it is in relation to COVID and what's opened up. And by the way, if there aren't huge spikes in this following what we've seen, mass demonstrations all around our country, I think you're going to start to feel pretty good about this, and things are going to open up even further. So I think erring on the side of caution is never a bad idea. I think that's what we all wanted to do all along in terms of our relation to COVID-19 and dealing with coronavirus. And if we had to look back and say, oh man, we were too cautious, that's a phenomenal outcome. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I think JC, as I said, diligent in his blocking for his quarterbacks, diligent in protecting his players as well. And that's what he was charged to do. And he's going to do that. And I think they've got a great advocate in him. And they're going to figure this out. At the end of the day, it is a business. There is money to be made. The players want to do it in the safest way possible. The teams do. The teams don't want players. What happens if two of your running backs, or let's take the one room that really you can't just pull somebody off the street. What if your quarterback room gets it and they're all out for 2 weeks in the regular season? Who are you getting? Is Jeff George getting the call? Is it time for my Disney movie, my opportunity? I don't know, but these are the things they have to figure out ahead of time.
No is the answer.
Yeah, definitely no.
Of those
my hospital trip, perhaps.
And the more ramp up time, clearly the better, though, because you've seen these colleges that are coming back and they've had chunks of cases in some places. Alabama with 5, some other schools had even more of those. So you want to get ahead of this and give yourself as much time, because you get diagnosed, you're on the shelf for 2 weeks at least. I mean, you've got to get ahead of this. So I don't know if that means you bag those preseason games, or if they can somehow come to an agreement that they can do this 2 weeks earlier in July. But time's ticking. You got to make that decision pretty soon for these guys to make their summer plans here.
Yeah, and Gribble, you make a great point. I mean, it could be more than 2 weeks. We've seen people across the country with this, and it's infected them for 3, 4, 5 weeks. So, I mean, until you're totally cleared, you're not going to be allowed back in the building. So who knows how long that might take. Our head coach, Kevin Stefanski, addressed the media on Wednesday. Gribble, your big takeaways from a pretty powerful 20-plus minutes with Kevin Stefanski and the media.
Man, listen, I'm just flat out impressed with the leadership. I think that's what he's shown from day one. And this is obviously a weird, a crazy situation for a first-year head coach. But I think somehow with all the circumstances that have gone around this right now, I think it helps him kind of establish that leadership, because he's empowering his players. He's bringing them together. They're all in these crazy, unique situations from a home situation, and then with what's going on in the world. And I think the position he believes in and feels strongly about is one that is going to really rally the players behind him. And I think we're already seeing that. When you talk to players, they talk about how much they enjoy this. And I think it was good to hear a coach just talk so openly about these topics. And I think he's clear in his messaging. And I think that's the most important thing. And the most important line from the entire press conference was the biggest thing is, I let them know I've got their back. And I think that's all the players want in this kind of situation.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And as we said on Browns Daily yesterday, he was born to do this. I mean, he was born to be this type of a leader. He was born to be a head football coach. We talked about the preparation. He's clearly so prepared, even for things that he couldn't possibly have foreseen or been prepared for. He's got his plan. He's got his process. But you hit the nail on the head. When we talked to Jedrick Wills last week, when all of this was going down, the first thing he said is that Kevin Stefanski made it clear to us he has our backs 100%, period. And he wanted us to know that. And they feel that. They believe that. Every player I've talked to talks about what a great communicator he is and how genuine he is. And so those are the things. Bill Callahan has been doing this a long time, said the most important thing you can do as a coach is make your players know, A, that you're genuine, but B, that you genuinely do care about them. And that creates that bond. And Kevin Stefanski has done a great job of it. I thought in that press conference, we couldn't have asked for a better spokesperson for our team and for our organization. I think Andrew Berry's done the same things as well, internally and externally, when given the opportunity. And it's amazing to think that Andrew Berry's the youngest GM in the history of the National Football League. Kevin Stefanski is in his first year, because both seem so polished, like seasoned vets. And I thought he did a great job. And there's no doubt what you said is right on the money, Andrew, and that is that this is a guy who has set the leadership of this team. He has taken unique circumstances, handled them with tremendous aplomb, and that has been a rallying point where he is the unquestioned leader of this team. And I think the locker room appreciates his perspective and his willingness to be a part of something that they could easily look at and say, well, that's not his fight. He's making it his fight. And I think that's powerful.
Yeah. You guys talked about it on Browns Daily on Wednesday and have talked about it since, over the last few weeks and even the last few months. The GM and the coach, I don't think since this team has been back in 99 have been more intertwined and in lockstep than these two guys. It's been pretty impressive.
It's been great.
The clear thing is, to me, is every time I hear Stefanski talk or every time I talk to him myself, it's comfortable in his own skin. And I think that's the most important characteristic a first-year head coach can have, especially when he's spending his day. Basically, he has a screen of faces, and he has to talk confidently enough and know that his message is sinking in, which I think is really hard to do. You're not really getting the body language feel. You're not seeing the eyes locked into you the way you would. And I think that he feels good about what he's done so far. And I think it'll make it that much more special when this team actually does come together for that first actual meeting.
Like I said, I think he was groomed for this. I mean, he's been around this for a long time in the league. I remember we talked to Pat Kerwin, whose son was his college roommate, and he said this kid always had a quiet confidence, always knew what he wanted to do, and it is this. And he's gone out and he's made it happen. And I think it's very impressive. I mean, he's so professional and so put together. I just called you Andrew in the middle of my speech, which is the first time I think I've ever done that in the history of our relationship, which dates back to 2014, at least without a sir in front of it. I don't know that's ever happened again.
Stefanski doesn't even do that with me.
No.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
No.
That's a big BPA moment. You got to come to BPA for that kind of stuff.
It's all sing kumbaya. All right, guys. Zagura, you've done quite a lot of these interviews, whether it's the Working from Home series, interviews for CBD. You've heard the press conferences. You've seen everything. Is there something that someone has said or a big takeaway, a player that has stood out to you over the last few weeks with everything that we've been going on and finally, getting a chance to talk to these guys as they train from home during this crazy time?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, they're all excited, right? And that's this. Oh, I'm excited. We're gonna have a great year. That's all the normal stuff. I would say some people that just individually have impressed me beyond maybe what I expected or what I knew. And in many cases, it's because they're young guys. Jedrick Wills was incredibly impressive. Every time I speak with Nick Harris, I'm blown away by him, and I think that he's going to have a tremendous future in this league. And ended up being a steal for the Browns. But if you say if there's one theme, if there's an overarching theme to all of this, there was a lot of concern, especially from veterans. How are we going to implement these new schemes, both sides of the ball, with, in this virtual period? That's difficult to do. And I think they've been impressed. And I mentioned earlier with Stefanski as a communicator, but the ability for the Browns leadership, whether that be Stefanski, AVP, whether it be Joe Woods on defense, to effectively communicate what they want from the players, from a scheme standpoint, from a responsibility standpoint, from a technique standpoint, and be able to show them, has blown a lot of these guys away. In fact, many of them say that we are mentally further along in this process doing it this way than we would have been even if we were there. And that speaks to the communication skills, the effectiveness of what they put together with our IT department, with our video departments, to really be able to hammer home what they're doing. And I think that's got a lot of players very excited. That's the one thing. They all realize clearly that Kevin Stefanski gets it and he's prepared and he's going to put them, and this is something players like. This is another thing you talk about, having their backs. The other thing is to know that a coach is going to put you in the best positions to succeed. And I think certainly on the offensive side of the ball, the guys all feel that once they've gone through the scheme, the way it's been explained to them, what their role will be has been explained to them, and that communication there.
All right, guys, time to have a little fun, as we do when I get the two of you together.
Yes.
ESPN's Jake Trotter, friend of the Cleveland Browns Daily Show, ranked the Browns position groups. And he had 8 position groups: the quarterback, the running back, wide receiver, tight end, O-line, D-line, linebacker, and the defensive back room. I would like you guys to rank them from 1 to number 8. Number 1 being the most important to number 8.
What's the most important or what's the best?
I'm sorry, the best. I said the best. My bad. I'm changing the rules.
That's all right.
That's
I
all
like
right.
to do that.
Yes, you do. I take a page out of your book. I would say the best from number 1 to number 8. My first question before we start this whole thing: do we break up the DB room into corners and safeties?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
So we're going to 9 groups then.
9.
I even think you can break up the DNs and the D tackles, but we can leave them all together if you'd like.
Nah, I don't want to do that. I don't
Okay.
want to.
Do you want us to go from 8, which is the least confident, to 1? Or do you want to – I think it's more –
I think we started – I would like to do that, but then I feel like we're going to lose track. So we should start at number 1.
look at the big brain on Gribbs. Come on. We're not going to lose track. We got this.
Gribbs, do you feel comfortable with that?
Yes. I'm comfortable either way.
We're totally winging this whole segment. Awesome. We're underway.
Let's go.
Hey,
Start with 8.
number 8, guys.
I thought we're 9.
Yeah, we're at 9, Gibby. Corners and safeties. Now we're at 9.
Now we have 9.
Yep, 9 is fine.
Now
Number 9.
9 is fine. Number 9. What do you got? Gribble, we'll go with you first.
I mean, I think the easy answer is based on simply experience, and that's the linebackers right now. I think it's just the one where there's really not a set starter at any position. I think we assume Mack Wilson will be one of these guys, and B.J. Goodson will be as well. Just not really sure where they're going to line up yet, and I think we'll get some clarity on that as training camp goes on. But experience-wise, I think they know that. That's why they've got the chip on their shoulder, and they're entering the year with lots of proof.
Yeah, this is the one unproven group. This is the one group that doesn't have somebody who's been a Pro Bowler, somebody who's been a first-team All-Pro, someone who, at least from a draft standpoint, has the pedigree of being a former first-round pick or a second-round pick. You don't have that in there. Got a couple threes in Taki, Jacob Phillips this year. B.J. Goodson was a fourth-rounder who started 29 games, which is the most of anybody in that room. In fact, it's more than everybody else in that room combined. And so, of course, love my guy, Mack Wilson, but that's the room that has the biggest question marks on paper, on the field, period. And honestly, after that, the next 8, this is going to be very difficult because all of the other rooms are very good on this team, which is a great thing for the Cleveland Browns.
Which leads me to number 8. Zagura, kick things off.
It's a tough one for me because I think that, like I said, we are very good. I'm going to go, honestly, I'm going to go the safety room next just because it's a little – look, Sendejo's a 10-year veteran. Like him a lot. I think Grant Delpit's going to be a stud. I think Carl Joseph played great the last couple of years before he got hurt and is a former first-round pick. Sheldrick Redwine showed us something last year as a starter, a fourth-round pick coming into his second season with 6 starts under his belt. I like this room. I actually like our safety room quite a bit. I think you have the versatility to put Sendejo out there with Delpit and Joseph. Both Delpit and Sendejo can cover the slot. They can both play free. They can both play strong, as can Joseph play free and strong. I like this room, to be honest with you. It's just I'm going to put them at 8th because we haven't seen any of these guys really other than Sheldrick Redwine in Browns uniforms or playing together.
Dribble.
That's what I had. And for 7, I'm going to stay in the same area. I'll go corners at number 7. I just think that you've got a Pro Bowler in Denzel Ward, and then you've got some upside with Greedy Williams. You want to see another full season out of him and Terrence Mitchell. But then you've got some and the addition of Kevin Johnson. But I think depth could be a question mark with this group. You've got to find a couple more bodies in there, and I just think you've got to see both Denzel and Greedy be healthy for a full season. So that's why I'll put them at 7.
Just to be different, and because I also feel a little different, I'm going to put the tight end 7th. And I know people say, wait a second now. We've got Harrison Bryant, 2-time Pro Bowler. Chief coming off of a very disappointing season. Then we drafted, and I'm pretty pumped about Harrison Bryant as well. I think that's a great one. Did I say Austin Hooper earlier? Or maybe I said Harrison Bryant. But Austin Hooper is our stud that we brought. Thank you. Harrison Bryant was in the draft, and Njoku. And then behind them, we got Steve Carlson, undrafted free agent, who showed some flashes I know is well thought of in our organization, and Pharaoh Brown. So it's a room that I feel really good about. In fact, the Browns feel so good about it. They didn't go into the draft with any intention, Andrew Berry said, of drafting a tight end. It's just Harrison Bryant was there in the 4th round. They couldn't believe it. They said he's too good of a player to pass up, so they drafted him. But that's a room where Hooper, 2-time Pro Bowler, Chief, I think this is a big year for him, a lot to prove there. And I think just if you look at the overall depth of that room versus the corner room and the pedigree, I like the corner room a little bit better. And I'll put them 6th. But I like that room. You talk about Denzel, Greedy, Kevin Johnson, a former first-rounder. Money Mitch is your 4th guy. And then you've got some players in that room who are helpful in other ways. Tavierre Thomas has been a core special teams player. Robert Jackson, I think, has certainly shown some flashes in his time here, as well as Donnie Lewis, potentially a slot corner for the future. I know that organizationally, they think Donovan Olumbo has a chance to come in and be a player with his length and his size. So we'll see. But that's still a pretty good room when you consider your starters are a first-rounder who's been to a Pro Bowl already, a second-rounder who had a pretty good rookie season, and a former first-rounder who was part of what I would call a very, very good Buffalo Bills defense a year ago.
I just I do agree with Gribbs. You got to see those guys on the field. In the last couple of years, we've had to go to corner number 5, corner number 6, even, and I wonder about that depth of that room, and we'll see how far some of those guys have come along in their development. Hopefully, we don't have to see too much, but at some point, it'll be nice to know that you've got those just in case. Gribbs, who do you have at number 6?
It's a tough one. I think, man, I'm going to go with the defensive line. I think that's where I'm going.
Wow.
I don't, because I just like the offense too much. I mean,
you like our tight end room better than a room.
Let me take this back, because
okay,
I thought we were each getting our spots there.
So this will be year 6. This will be year 6.
Okay, so my 6 would have been the tight ends. I thought we had locked that in.
Okay, all right, fine. So we're in agreement there.
So then my 5th would be the defensive line.
Okay.
I think that you're great on paper with starters, and you've fortified the depth there. I just need to see it all come together for a full season. I want to see I'm too scarred after what I saw at the end of last year. I think we're all going to get flashbacks of what happened when that group was decimated. So I think this is a big year for them, and I think that the key addition to me is Adrian Claiborne. You need that third pass rusher. So to see him, if he can step in and provide the production he has had the last few years, then I think you're good. But this is more of a reflection of just how good I feel about the offense right now.
All right, so this might be unpopular. I might shock the world a little bit here. So we were the same in our first, just different order, but the groups that we had 9, 8, 7, and 6. We stayed on the defense side: linebackers, safeties, corners, tight ends, offense. Honestly, I'm going to say the quarterback position here. I think if you were to look around the league and say you could take rooms out of our team, where would our room rank in the National Football League? I think our D-line room is going to rank pretty well, actually. I think our quarterback room, based off of what happened last year with Baker Mayfield, is not. And I think that you look at it and you say to yourself, okay, we've got Myles Garrett is considered a transcendent talent. Sheldon Richardson's a Pro Bowl performer. And I'll talk about the D-line more when I talk about them. But in the quarterback room, I love our quarterback room. I believe in Baker. I think he's going to have a big bounce back year. But we don't have a Pro Bowler. We don't have an All-Pro in that room. And Case Keenum, a very good player who took that Minnesota Vikings team to the NFC Championship. Is our quarterback room better than it was a year ago? Significantly. I think significantly so. I think it's an excellent room. But from a top line, until Baker proves it this year, which I believe that he will, I think if you were to compare our rooms around the league, our quarterback room is going to be trailing our D-line, our O-line, our wide receivers, and our running backs pretty substantially in how they're regarded against the other 32 teams.
No, okay, I'll wait till we get to that position till it comes up. That was number 5. Now it's number 4. Gribble, we'll start with you at number 4.
Well, I would have had QBs at this point. So where are we locking those in? Because I think the other 3 for me are pretty set above the QB, and I'll echo what Nathan just said. I was just I think I was too afraid to put the QBs that low because I feel good. I feel it's just
so do I.
I forget. I'm just forgetting the 2019 happened for what we saw from Baker, and I have that much trust in an offense that is really going to be built to bring the most out of him and not put too much on his plate, which I think just last year there was just too much put on his plate, and I think that it was your typical second season regression that we used to see in the past with a lot of quarterbacks, and I think he's poised to have a big year bouncing back. So I think I will say there is a big separation between the quarterbacks and the rest of my list because I think those 3 are much higher than the quarterbacks in my rankings right now.
And listen, I love our tight end room, and I think our tight end room is a top 10 tight end room in the NFL for sure. But this is what I'm talking. We have a lot of talent on paper, so we got to go out and we've got to win games. I mean, other than the linebacking room, which is unproven, although it has talent in it and pedigree, it's unproven. Everywhere else, you've got guys who are proven. I mean, we just safeties and core, all of this. It's all there. That's why we've got to be good. I'll go with – this is tough for me. I considered wide receiver here because we're so top heavy at that position. And if you were to look at the whole body of it, I do think the defensive line as a unit is better. But I'll put the D line here. Myles Garrett, obviously coming back from what happened last year, but I was on pace, having a sack a game. One of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Vernon was great when he played last year as well. Now you bring in Claiborne. Chad Thomas all of a sudden is your fourth defensive end. Then you go to the interior of that line. Sheldon Richardson, who I think is criminally underrated and an excellent player. Larry Ogunjobi. You bring in Billings. And I'll tell you, when you watch Jordan Elliott on tape, you get excited about that guy as a sub-package pass rusher, at least early in his career, his movement skills, his ability. So you have a strong 8 in that defensive line room that you feel pretty good about. Of course, Chad Thomas is probably going to be pushed. This isn't the regime that drafted him. And when you're, the top pick in the third round, you're expected, or one of the top picks in the third round, you're expected to have a bigger impact than he's had through his first 2 seasons. But top line and the fact that potentially, maybe Clowney could come into that room later on, it's a pretty good room. And I like it. I like all the rooms that we have. I mean, that's why we should be good. That's why there should be some expectations, even though last year has kind of put us under the radar, which is a great place to be.
Gribble, number 3.
Number 3, I'm going with wide receivers for the team right now. And I think that your top 2 are great, but you need more than 2. And I think that there's a lot of question marks beyond Odell and Jarvis, and not to mention that both of them are coming off pretty significant surgeries this offseason. So those players are going to need to step up whenever these guys get on the field. I like the re-signing of Rashard Higgins. He's falls into the Baker category with me. I'm just going to forget about last year and pretend that he's coming off the 2018 season. I think Damian Ratley has done well in spots, and I think that the Browns are hoping to get more out of Taywan Taylor. Just didn't really see much of him in outside of those first couple games last year. Tough adjustment for him to come in at the end of the preseason and make that switch. But there's a legitimate competition going on there for those 3rd, 4th, and 5th spots. So that's why I've got them as my number 3.
Yeah, I agree with that. The good news is we're running predominantly a 2 wide receiver offense, and our top 2 are as good as, any tandem in the NFL. They're certainly in an upper echelon. Maybe somebody Mike Evans and Chris Godwin's a pretty good one as well. But there are good tandems out there, but the Browns tandem is elite. That is an elite twosome. I love bringing Hollywood Higgins back. Taywan Taylor, look, this offense, when it's been run well historically, has always had somebody who could take the top off of the defense. And that's what Taywan Taylor was drafted to do in Tennessee. You saw him run around last year. He clearly can do that. Will he be able to do that on a more consistent basis? Not sure. Ratley, as you mentioned, Kaderil Hodge, who's one of our core special teams guys. And then you draft the ultimate wild card, Donovan Peoples-Jones, number 1 receiver recruit in the country. He's got the size. He's got the speed. He's got the jumping ability. He's got it all. Was he held back at Michigan? We'll find out. But I think you talk about a ball of clay to mold. He's got it all. Chad O'Shea to work with him, getting to work with Jarvis. He could be special. I'll throw one thing out there. If we had Taylor Gabriel, who's a free agent, who's played in this offense, who's played for the Browns, if you brought him in, I would all of a sudden bump our wide receiver group way up, because he is what this offense, when it's been very successful historically, and I'm going to go for the Kyle Shanahan years in the modern era with the Browns, then with the Falcons where Gabriel went down there and had 700 yards. You look at, even with the Niners, he had the guys that could stretch, that one guy who could stretch the field last year, Deebo Samuel did that a lot for them. That's the one thing that you want to see. Marquise Goodwin has had some big years for him. That one guy that can really be explosive. And I'll give Taywan Taylor the shot at it, but I've seen Taylor Gabriel. I've seen him perform at a high level. That's the one thing that's missing. It's missing that full complement where you're like, all right, we have a lot of different stuff going on in here that we could do. But it's, again, a 2-receiver offense predominantly, and if those 2 are healthy, you feel really, really good about it.
Segura, number 2 for you.
Number 2, I'm going to go with the offensive line. And who would have thought we'd say that? Last year, there would have been 8 or 9 most likely around there. Not going into the year, but at the end of the year, that's certainly where the ranking would have been. And so what do? You go out and you bring in Jack Conklin, who's been a first-team All-Pro. You draft Jedrick Wills with the 10th overall pick. And now you look at your line and you say from left to right, Jedrick Wills at left tackle, Bitonio, multiple-time Pro Bowler. J.C. Tretter should be a multiple-time Pro Bowler. Your right guard, internally, Bill Callahan, he really feels good about Wyatt Teller. And apparently they have a relationship going back to his pre-draft process that we found out when we got a chance to talk to him. And then at right tackle, as I mentioned, Conklin. Your backup tackles now, Chris Hubbard, who started 29 games for the Browns last 2 years, 43 starts in his career. He's a guy that can play all 5 positions, in fact, has at various points in his career. Kendall Lamb started 13 games 2 years ago for the Texans, made a couple starts for the Browns last year. On the interior, you got Drew Forbes in the mix. There are a lot of guys that they like. You get Nick Harris in the draft, who I think is going to be a great fit. You just have some pretty good depth, and there are other guys we could go in. That's where you have the most depth on the roster right now. But you feel pretty good about that room, the starters, and knowing that if some things were to happen, you have some competent professional contingency plans. I mean, Chris Hubbard got a big deal because of what he did as the jack of all trades 6th lineman for the Steelers.
Yeah, I agree. That was going to be my number 2. And I just think that you brought up 2014 when you talked about Taylor Gabriel. I'm going to bring up 2014 when you talk about the offensive line, because I think that's the closest similarity you have, just with different strengths to different spots. Obviously, you had a Hall of Famer at left tackle. Now you've got a rookie, but one you feel really good at. You've got really good, Joe Bitonio, one of the best in the league at his position. Jack
Better
Conklin,
now than he was then.
at right tackle at that position. So I just feel so much better about that group. And I can't foresee a scenario where you have 2 straight years where you can't find a right guard. I just think that you're going to find one and find one that can play really good for you at that spot. So I feel fine that you're going to be able to lock that up. And I just think the majority of teams around the league do not feel this good about 4 of their 5 offensive linemen right now. I think that's the key with ranking these position groups, is that the Browns are in an enviable spot where they've got 4 spots pretty much locked up on their offensive line, and the one opening being at right guard. I'm good with that.
Now, see, I am surprised that both of you have the offensive line as high as you do, based on the fact that we don't know what left tackle will look like. And right guard is still a question mark going into camp, although you have plenty of quality candidates for that position. I think 3 out of the 5 you know for sure. 2 are a
4
little unknown.
No,
we know Wills is going to start.
Yeah.
I'm saying that. There's a bold prediction. But, I think we know that that's going to be the case, but we don't know what he is yet.
The guy gave up 1 sack in 39 games in the SEC. I think he's going to be good. Listen,
I just think the defensive line
Bring the Hoff in. Get the Hoff on the hotline.
The defensive line is better than the offensive line if you're
I love our
positions
D-line
right now.
I love our D-line. We have – you need – if Vernon was coming off of 16 games and 10 sacks, I'd feel a lot better about it on the D-line. And I think Larry didn't have the year he wanted to have last year. You have more depth. Like I said, I think you're solid 8 there. Our line, though, when you think about what it could be in the league with Treader is an upper echelon center. Bitonio is one of the best guards in the league. Conklin's one of the best tackles in the league. So 3 out of your 5 are guaranteed are elite at their positions. Wills, everybody's excited about, and those who know this game a lot better than I do in those positions are incredibly excited about him. 4 out of 5 is good. You go back to 2014, our line was Joe Thomas, rookie Joel Bitonio, who played very well. Obviously, Alex Mack, our boy John Greco, and then on the right side, you had Mitchell Schwartz. That line was very instrumental in what that team was able to accomplish on offense with what you would call substandard skill position players relative to the league, certainly below average. Now we have elite skill position players relative to the league, and I think we have the chance to have a real elite offensive line.
Gribbs at number 1, obviously. Everybody's united.
You've got one of the best running backs in the league, if not the best, in Nick Chubb. And then you also have Kareem Hunt, who is one of the best running backs in the league as well. And I'm going by math. At most, you're going to have 2 of those guys on the field. So that's pretty good. And to have those 2. And also, not many teams have the odd stability at running back that the Browns had last year. You basically bring them back to the same room as last year. There's with Ernest Johnson and Dontrell Hilliard, and you're adding some undrafted free agents in Brian Herring and Benny LeMay. This is a stable group. It's the one position you're bringing back your position coach at. I just feel very good about this group. And this should be the year for both Chubb and Kareem Hunt. If this is a career year, if this is going to be a career year, it's going to be this one. You got Chubb in his 3rd season, Hunt in his 4th season. This is prime years for the running backs. This is the apex for this group, and I think that I think it'll play out that way.
Historically speaking, I don't know if you've ever had a tandem of running backs this talented in their primes at the same time. And the Saints recently with Mark Ingram and Kamara were certainly a dynamic duo there. You go back to Marcus Allen, Bo Jackson. I brought up on Browns Daily the Chargers when LaDainian and they had Michael the Burner Turner, but they never gave Turner the ball. He just averaged 6 yards a carry and then went on to run for 1,700 yards the first year to be a featured back. But Kareem Hunt led the league in rushing in 2017. Kareem Hunt had 14 touchdowns, about 1,400 total yards in 11 games in 2018 before all of this happened. He was elite as it gets. And now here he is with Nick Chubb, who might be the best pure runner of the football in the NFL. And we talked to Kareem on CBD yesterday. He's got a big chip on his shoulder. Nobody, he said, people aren't, he noticed it. We've noticed it, but he noticed it as well. People aren't saying my name, but they're going to remember his name, and he's going to make sure of that. And I think one of the biggest challenges in an offseason of a lot of challenges, if we're going to move to things that are certainly less important, is how do you divide that playing time? How do you distribute those touches? How do you keep both of these guys happy? Do you worry about keeping both of these guys happy? How do you utilize them? Because they are weapons, but typically always, there's only one person who can carry the ball on a given play, and there are only so many snaps. There are only so many carries. Could we see a situation? Chubb had 300 last year. And this is a point I brought up on CBD. I'm curious to hear what you think about it. It wasn't even a point. It was more just a theoretical discussion. If this organization, I think you have to take a step back. You realize long-term, the idea of having Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb in your backfield together is untenable, right? That's not going to happen. So if that's the case, if you're saying, I want to commit to Nick Chubb long-term, do you do more of an even split? Do you even feature Kareem Hunt a little more so that Nick Chubb doesn't have a 335 touch season again this year?
I mean, I wouldn't feature Hunt more. I would just make it as balanced as possible, because I think Hunt was underutilized as a runner last year.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean,
5 carries a game.
And I thought when he got the ball as a runner, he had that extra juice in him, and he always fell forward. I liked getting him the ball, especially on the goal line. I liked Kareem Hunt in those situations. So I would just go for more of a balance. You know that both guys are not gonna be problems when it comes to this. I think they're both clearly team guys, and I just think you need to split it as much as you possibly can, because I think that will be the best for your success this year. I think we're going to expect Kareem to be in a little bit different of a role than he was last year, because I think that was a little bit thrown together. It was a tough situation with him coming through midway. So I would balance it as much as possible. Maybe a slight edge to Nick Chubb, but I mean, these are two really good running backs.
And at the same time, though, it's certainly really hard to tell myself just mentally, and I think the world of Kareem Hunt. I saw him that game that he had, his last game in Cleveland as a member of the Chiefs. He was the AFC Offensive Player of the Week. I mean, he put up over 200 total yards, I think, and 3 touchdowns, just diced us passer as a runner, as a receiver, in every way possible. But it's so hard to say, I don't want to just give Nick Chubb the ball 20 times, because I know what that looks like, and it's good.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful thing.
You just don't want to become the only fear I have is you don't want to do what the Broncos did last year. They had something really good going with Philip Lindsay being the main guy the year before. And then they tried to work in Royce Freeman. And granted, this is like apples and oranges comparison between Chubb and Hunt and Royce Freeman and Philip Lindsay. But I thought it just messed things up a little bit there. They never really could get into a rhythm. And then when we go play them last year and Philip Lindsay's breaking off these huge runs, I was like, why is this guy not getting the ball every time he gets, so you've got to make it so you are balancing it out, but not ruining the flow for both guys. And I think that's the balance they have to strike offensively.
So for me, when I think of what that could look like in a pretty productive way, I think you kind of think of the Saints and Mark Ingram, and Kamara was the main guy, even though he's more the Hunt than the Chubb. But figuring out a balance. That year Kamara had 270 touches, 1,500 total yards, 18 touchdowns. Ingram, in only 12 games, still had 150 touches and scored 7 times and put up 800 total yards. Maybe a little bit more of a balance than that, but isn't that kind of where you're at? Maybe or more like even 2017. Ingram, 230 carries, 1,100 yards, 12 touchdowns, plus 400 receiving. Kamara had 1,500 total yards and 200 touches himself. That's the year, 2017. That's what you're looking for. 250 plus touches for Chubb and around 200 for Hunt. Sign me up for that. Give me the 2017 Saints backfield with us, because I think our guys are more talented, and let's see what happens.
All right. No pressure, Coach. Just need you to
That's a tough thing to do. It's a tough thing to do.
You got to think the Saints didn't have a fullback that year. Am I correct?
They had Zach Line was the fullback.
Play much?
Not heavily involved.
So that's what I wonder how that affects the snaps and touches.
Sure. They also had 2 games of John Kuhn. Remember John Kuhn, folks? So, yeah.
Nice pull. All right, so those are your position rankings.
It's good. I mean,
they're really
8 of
good.
the 9 you
they're
feel really
good.
Yeah.
They just have to show it.
Yeah,
and I will also say with my rankings, I factored in injuries because I think that's why I had maybe the D line a little bit lower than you guys did, because I think one injury on that line and that group could affect them a lot more than some of these other groups if they
That's a great point.
Injuries. I just think that group to me is I think any position, but we just saw it last year and it just is.
That's the same reason. I think that's the same reason.
Never again.
Corner. I think we all
Never again.
Quarterbacks ranked as low as we do. That's a talented room, but if we need 5 or 6, not really sure. Let's hope we don't.
I love our top 4. I really do. I like our top 4 in that room, and I think the guys you have behind them are filling out. Well, you need somebody else who can emerge. I think really more than anything, you need somebody who can emerge as your backup nickel. Because Money Mitch, I think, is your backup outside corner. You need somebody who can emerge as that backup nickel. And by the way, that might come from your safety room. I mean, that Sendejo did that in the playoffs last year and did it pretty well. They actually are pretty high on what Sendejo can do from a versatile skill set standpoint. But that's where Donnie Lewis, who was drafted last year, who was purely an inside corner, you need somebody like that to step up and really show what they can do.
AJ Green?
AJ Green would be a great candidate. And that's, listen, the most prized undrafted free agent. And I know that's a weird thing to be, but he is. And a guy who played very well at Oklahoma State. When we talked to him, a boulder on his shoulder, a mountain on his shoulder, and ready to prove what he could do. He would be perfect. And I think he's going to get every chance to compete. Every chance.
Nope, I agree.
Just turned 22 on Wednesday also, guys. Just
happy birthday.
Or Tuesday.
Young. The theme. It's all up to Kevin Stefanski and his staff to get them ready to go for opening day in September. Knock on wood, it's in September. That's going to wrap up episode 31 of the best podcast available. Thanks to the Z, stands for Zagura, for stopping by, and Jeff McDaniel for spinning the dials and taking care of business behind the scenes. You can log on to clevelandbrowns.com for the latest podcasts, or wherever you go to get your podcast. Like and subscribe today to the best podcast available. Also, make sure to check us out on YouTube. You can watch all the frivolity from when I totally screwed up a segment here today at youtube.com/Browns. For Andrew Gribble, I'm Jason Gibbs. Thanks for watching, and thanks for listening to the best podcast available.